A story is good when you continue to see more and more in it, and when it continues to escape you. So said author Flannery O'Connor in a talk she gave to aspiring writers. She told them this was her way of judging whether or not a story was any good. I've read it to you before, and I will read it again right now. A story is good when you continue to see more and more in it, and when it continues to escape you. I want you to just hold that thought. This morning we're looking at the story of Rebekah. But before we get into that, I have two things to say. First, as I approached this sermon about the Rebekah story, I tried to have an open stance that was as free from assumptions as possible. I wanted to be guided by the story itself and not by anything I might have heard in the past. So what you're about to hear is based on what I found, what struck me as interesting and important, what I thought the storyteller was up to. But this, of course, may not be what you would have found. And so the point is, you're stuck with my observations this morning. But if you don't like that, I encourage you to go back to the middle of the book of Genesis and see for yourself what strikes you. It's amazing storytelling. The second thing I want to say to you is, before you start getting all weirded out or offended or feeling superior, you should know that marrying your first cousin is completely legal today, right now, in all of Canada. It's legal in all of Central and South America. It's legal in most of Europe, most of Africa. It's legal in Australia and New Zealand. It is only legal in 40% of the US. But when you change it to your first cousin's child, to your first cousin once removed, then it's legal in all of Canada and all those other places in the world I mentioned, and 90% of the US. Foreshadowing. So, here we go. And of course, to understand Rebekah's story, we have to talk about Abraham and Sarah, her in-laws, Isaac, her husband, and Jacob and Esau, her twin boys. So let's start with Abraham and Sarah. Actually, when we first meet them, their names are Abram and Sarai. God promises Abram that his descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. But then, nothing happens. Sarai doesn't get pregnant. They're both getting older. So Sarai decides to hurry things along. She says to Abram, "Here, take my maidservant and sleep with her. Maybe we could start our family line that way." Abram says, "Okay." So the maidservant gets pregnant and has a baby boy. But now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of tension in the household. Now, the maidservant seems to have more honor than Sarai. Now, even though it was Sarai's idea in the first place, she's really jealous and wants the maidservant sent away. It's a total mess. So, God changes the subject. "Hey, Abram," says God, "here's something new. You and all the males in your household must be circumcised." This is a powerful way of changing the subject. Try it this week. Practical application of the sermon. And then God continues, "By the way, circling back, I was serious. Sarai will give birth. This covenant I'm making with you, it's for her descendants. So I'm changing your names to Abraham and Sarah because you will be the ancestors of many." Abraham laughs when he hears that, thinking, really? Two old people having a baby. And God says, "Yes, really. But now, when you have that baby boy, you'll have to name him Isaac," which means he laughs. So, don't you have some circumcising to do? So all the males of Abraham's household get circumcised that day. Abraham is 99. The maidservant's boy is now 13. Good times. Later, Abraham and Sarah have 3 visitors, which eventually they realize were representatives from God. These visitors tell Abraham that Sarah will give birth within a year. Sarah, who's listening from inside the tent, laughs. The visitors ask Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh?" And Sarah, from inside the tent, says, "I didn't." And the visitors say, "Yes, you did." And sure enough, within the year, a baby boy is born and is named Isaac, after laughter. Zoom forward 40 years. 40 years. Sarah has now died. Abraham is old and very wealthy. But Isaac is still unmarried. Abraham knows that his little family is supposed to turn into a huge nation, descended from the currently unmarried Isaac. But Abraham also knows that his family is supposed to be set apart, culturally and religiously distinct from the people around them, and he's worried about cultural assimilation. So, Abraham gives a highly trusted servant a hugely important job. Leave this promised land temporarily and go back to the land of Abraham's relatives to choose a wife for Isaac from among those relatives. And that is one way to avoid assimilation, I suppose. Keep it in the family. So that trusted servant leaves the promised land and travels toward Abraham's relatives with 10 camels loaded up with samples of Abraham's wealth. The servant is understandably nervous about choosing a wife for Isaac. So the servant, when he gets there, prays, "Dear God, here I am. I'm at my destination. I'm near a well. When the women of this land come in the cool of the day to draw water, I'm going to ask all the eligible young women if they'll give me a drink. If one of them does and offers to water the camels, then I'll know that is the young woman you have chosen for Isaac." And before he even finishes that prayer, here comes Rebekah, the star of this morning's story. He asks her for a drink, and she gives it to him. And then she says, "I'll get water for your camels, too." And that takes a long time, because camels drink a lot. And the whole time she's doing that, the servant just watches her. It's a little weird. Finally, when she finishes, he asks her about her family. And she tells him the names of her parents, and then the servant realizes the good news. Good news. This is Abraham's grandniece. Or to put that another way, Rebekah is Isaac's first cousin once removed. No sneering. It's perfect, the servant realizes. God has made a good choice. The servant then lavishes all sorts of gifts and jewelry on Rebekah, but doesn't tell her why. And eventually, the servant is invited to come stay with her family, and he tells them about his mission and his prayer and what Rebekah did and what it means. Her family sees this as an obvious act of God, and they give permission for Rebekah to become Isaac's wife. They don't consult her, of course. But when the servant wants to take her back to Isaac right now, the family hesitates. That's too fast. They ask for the customary 10-day waiting period just to check things out and make sure everything is legit. But the servant really wants to return with her now. That's risky, sending this young woman away with a stranger to a family group she doesn't really know. So now they do consult her. And they ask her, "Will you go with this man?" And she says, "I will go." So she does. And the only person who goes with her is her nurse, a very unusual occupation to be mentioned in the Bible, actually. This nurse has now grown, and as Rebekah has, and become her teacher and her trusted friend. Rebekah leaves everything and everyone else that she knows behind. Days and days later, as they approach the promised land, from a distance, Rebekah sees a man meditating in a field. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. But he looks up at her. She asks Abraham's servant, "Who is that man?" And he says, "That is Isaac, the son of Abraham." So Rebekah covers herself with a veil as they draw near, because that's what brides do in that time and place. And Isaac gets it. He understands. He marries her and loves her and finds comfort for the first time since his mother's death. But no babies arrive. For 20 years, no babies arrive. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that is difficult. They pray and suffer. In the meantime, at some point during those 20 years of waiting, there's a famine in their land, so Rebekah and Isaac go to a Philistine city. Isaac is worried, though, because Rebekah is so beautiful. He's sure the Philistine men will want to marry her. So, when the Philistines ask about her, Isaac just says, oh, she's my sister. Otherwise, he thinks, they might kill me so they can marry her. And if that sounds familiar to you, that's because much earlier, Abram did this with Sarai twice. It's a strange family trait. But not too much later, the Philistine king looks down from a window high up and sees Isaac lovingly caressing and comforting Rebekah. And the king instantly calls for Isaac and says, "Why didn't you just tell us she was your wife?" And Isaac says, "I was afraid." The king says, "Don't you realize what could have happened? One of us might have married her, and then we would have been cursed." Well, that gets settled. And Isaac and Rebekah, they themselves settle in this Philistine city, and Isaac gets rich. So rich, actually, that the Philistine king eventually says, "Please go away. You are too powerful now." So Isaac and Rebekah peacefully find another place to settle, and things are going well, except for that one thing that has haunted them for 20 years. But finally, after such a long wait, and after so many prayers, Rebekah does get pregnant. With twins. With twins that jostle each other violently in her womb. She is so worried about it that she asks God, "Why is this happening?" And be careful what you ask God, because God gives her an answer. Here it is. "Two nations are in your womb. They will be separated. One will be stronger. The older will serve the younger," which is backwards. Great. So now she has to carry that in her heart along with the twins in her womb. She's carrying a lot. Finally, those twins do arrive. Esau is the first to be born, and he's covered all over his body with red hair that's like fur. Scholars think that Esau just means hairy. Jacob is the second, but not by much. He's born holding on to Esau's heel. And in fact, Jacob means he grasps the heel, which is also a common Hebrew saying that means he is deceitful. That's a nice name. Well, the boys grow up. Esau becomes a skillful hunter, a man of the open country. Jacob, on the other hand, is content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, their father, prefers the company of Esau because Isaac has a taste for wild game. Man. Rebekah, on the other hand, prefers the company of Jacob. After they're grown, Esau comes in from a hunt and he is famished. Jacob, at that time, is cooking up a nice red lentil stew. "Let me have some of that," Esau says. "I'm starving." "Sure," says Jacob. "It'll cost you, well, just your birthright." In other words, just to be clear, Jacob is saying, "Esau, you're the firstborn, so you have all the inheritance advantages. Just sell me those for the cost of this stew." Esau thinks about it. If I can round up and use the verb think. Esau is not, to put it politely, a thoughtful man. He says, "I'm about to die here. What good is a birthright if I'm dead? So it's a deal." And in this time and place, a verbal agreement like that is legally binding. So Esau is officially hooped. Jacob will now inherit twice as much as Esau, in addition to becoming the head of the household in the next generation. Esau should be upset, but he just eats the stew and some bread, gets up, leaves. Other than that, things go pretty well for the family. We don't hear much, except that when the twin boys are about 40, the twin boys now are about 40, Esau marries 2 Hittite women. You know, that's the worst. He does exactly what Abraham was afraid of, and Isaac and Rebekah experience a lot of grief over it. I don't really know anything about Hittite women. I'm just speaking in ignorance, which is the funnest, the best way to just make sweeping statements. Oh, those Hittites. Eventually, Isaac gets old and weak and blind. He's worried that he'll die soon. So he wants to give Esau the blessing that is owed the firstborn. And in that time and place, these blessings were considered quite powerful, almost magical. He calls for Esau and says, "My son, go out to the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." But Rebekah is eavesdropping when Isaac says this to Esau. So when Esau leaves, as a man does, for the open country to go hunting, Rebekah says to Jacob, "Okay, look, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' So listen carefully," she says. "Do what I tell you. Go out to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he might give you the blessing before he dies." Jacob says to Rebekah, I'm interrupting for a moment. Notice what Jacob does not say. Jacob does not say, "That's immoral. That's unethical." No. Jacob says, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man. I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would be caught in my trickery, and that would bring a curse rather than a blessing." Rebekah says to him quite dismissively, "Let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go get those goats." So Jacob goes and gets them and brings them to his mother, Rebekah, and she prepares some tasty food just the way Isaac likes it. Then Rebekah takes Esau's best clothes while he's out hunting and puts them on Jacob. She also covers Jacob's hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. This is quite a picture. Then she hands Jacob the tasty food and the bread she has made, and he goes into Isaac, and he says to a blind man, "My father." Yes, my son? Isaac answers. Who is it? Jacob says to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing. Isaac asks him, how did you find it so quickly, my son? The Lord our God gave me success. Then Isaac says, come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are Esau or not. Jacob goes close to his father, who touches him and says, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau, goatskin. So Isaac prepares to bless him, but asks one last time, are you really my son Esau? I am, Jacob replies. Then Isaac says, then bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing. So Jacob brings food, and Isaac eats. And Jacob brings wine, and Isaac drinks. Then Isaac says, maybe one last check. Come here, my son, much closer. And when Jacob draws very near, Isaac catches the smell of Esau's clothes. That must have been a really good smell. Isaac catches the smell of Esau's clothes, and then Isaac is convinced, and he gives Jacob the blessing for the firstborn. Jacob leaves quickly before he's found out, and right at that moment, Esau returns from the hunt and prepares his food for Isaac, and goes into his father and says, sit up, father, eat the stew and give me your blessing. And Isaac says, who are you? Esau says, Father, who else? I'm your firstborn son, Esau. Isaac says, then who was it I just blessed? I ate the food he brought me. I blessed him, and the blessing cannot be taken back. Esau says, no, bless me too. But Isaac just says, he deceived me. He took your blessing. Esau says, Jacob is well named. First he took my birthright, and now this. Can't you give me something? Do you have any blessing left? Not much, my son, but here goes, and here comes the blessing. You will live away from the earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw off his yoke from your neck. And while Jacob is saying these things, Esau weeps. Over weeks and months, Esau's grief turns, understandably, to bitterness. He nurtures a grudge against his younger brother Jacob and makes plans to kill him after their father dies. But Esau being Esau, he's not too subtle about it, and Rebekah finds out. So Rebekah says to Jacob, your brother Esau is planning to kill you. You must leave. Go to my brother's place, far away. Stay there until I call for you. I'll wait for Esau's anger to subside, even if it takes years. Just do what I tell you. It'll be better than losing both of my sons on one day. For if Esau kills you, he too will die as punishment. And she doesn't seem to trust Jacob quite. As an insurance policy to make sure Jacob really does leave, Rebekah then goes to her old, weak, blind, failing husband and says this, I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from Hittite women like these, my life won't be worth living. So, as is so often the case, thinking it is his own idea, Isaac calls for his son Jacob and basically repeats Rebekah's orders without knowing it. Isaac sends Jacob away to Rebekah's brother's place, and Isaac tells Jacob to pick a wife from that man's daughters. In other words, Jacob is told by Isaac to go pick a wife from among his first cousins. No sneering. So Jacob goes, and Jacob does exactly that. In fact, he ends up with 2 first cousins as wives. But that's another story. As far as Rebekah is concerned, the story is essentially over. Her story ends with this choreography of Jacob's blessing theft, and then choreography of his escape to her brother's place. We don't hear much else about her. We do hear that her nurse/teacher/friend dies and is buried honorably. Her name is Deborah, we're told. We do hear that Rebekah and Isaac are eventually buried alongside Abraham and Sarah. But other than that, in the rest of the Old Testament, we don't hear a thing about Rebekah. And in the New Testament, she's only mentioned once by Paul in his letter to the Romans, but he's not really talking about her. He's talking about her twin boys, just mentions her. And yet, she's hugely influential in the overall epic Israelite story. The covenant people could have been, perhaps should have been, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Doesn't quite have the ring. These people could have ended up revering a mouth-breathing, dim-witted carnivore. But instead, thanks to Rebekah, the covenant people descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, whose 12 sons produce the 12 tribes. Jacob, who wrestles with a stranger throughout the night, only to discover that stranger was God, who changes Jacob's name to Israel, which means he struggles with God. And so, because of Jacob, because of Rebekah, we call this people group, these 12 tribes, the Israelites, after him. They are, by definition, by the name, they are the people who struggle with God, the people who ask questions, who are honest, who never settle for thoughtless obedience. They're not perfect, but they're pretty amazing. And that's a huge legacy of Rebekah. We also saw in this story that both Isaac and Esau are not the brightest knives in the crayon box. So, in a way, Rebekah helped save the Israelites from a pretty dim fate. And this may be overstating things a little, but it's fun to overstate things. It seems to me that one way to view this Rebekah story and how she guided things toward Jacob, toward Israel, is to say that the Israelites are actually Rebekah's legacy. In fact, some Jewish thinkers have suggested that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob should really be Abraham, Rebekah, and Jacob, because Isaac doesn't really do very much. Well, a story is good when you continue to see more and more in it, and when it continues to escape you. And I can tell you, while preparing this sermon, I definitely saw more and more in the story than I had remembered. There's all sorts of wordplay and funny dialogue and great storytelling, yes, but I was especially struck by the power of Rebekah. She was a go-getter from the very beginning. She was opportunistic, for better and for worse. When a stranger showed up from a distant relative and started handing out golden bangles, she saw an opportunity. She said, "I will go." When blind, failing Isaac was in danger of blessing the older oaf of a son, she saw an opportunity and dressed up a reluctant Jacob in goatskins. When Esau caused his father distress by marrying Hittite women, Rebekah saw an opportunity and used the fear of even more Hittite women to get Jacob out of town for many years while Esau's anger subsided, and as a result saved both their lives. So there's more and more in this story. I also think the story of Rebekah continues to escape us. How are we supposed to feel about this story? How are we supposed to feel about the characters in this story? Are we supposed to be inspired? Encouraged? Flabbergasted? Confused? Disgusted? The story seems beyond categorization. As the sermon title said in the e-bulletin, the story refuses to be domesticated. It's wild. It's untamed. And in that, I believe, we can find a refreshing, raw, honest authenticity, because we recognize the deep truth contained in a wild, untamed, undomesticated story. And that truth is this: despite our best efforts, life is so often wild, untamed, and undomesticated. We try to bottle it up, but we can't. As in the best stories in life, we continue to see more, and yet it continues to escape us. It's one of the profound mysteries of being alive. So all we were supposed to be doing this morning was explore the great storytelling of the Bible, and specifically the Rebekah story, but look what happened. Like all great storytelling, it has opened us up to surprise. As Pamela read to us this morning, the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do you tell stories?" And Jesus answered, "I tell stories to create readiness, to nudge people toward an awakening, toward a new understanding." So may we experience that. May we see more and more as we grow into the beautiful mystery of God's great story. Amen.